Every single one of us is here because of an absolutely incredible biological journey. Today, we're going to trace that exact story, from the very beginning, the fundamentals of our sexuality, through the complex dance of reproduction, all the way to the moment of birth itself. Let's dive in.
So here's how we'll break it down. First, we'll look at the very blueprint of our sexuality. Then we'll see how that blueprint gets activated as we come of age. After that, we'll get into what happens in the body during intimacy, and finally, we'll follow that amazing journey from a single cell all the way to a new baby.
All right, first up, the blueprint of sexuality. Before we can even begin to talk about the really complex stuff, we have to understand the fundamental building blocks. The biological foundation that makes this whole story possible. Now, while we're focusing on the biology today, it's so important to remember that human sexuality is never just about biology. As this quote points out, it's also deeply woven into our cultures and societies. And honestly, keeping that in mind makes the science part even more fascinating. Okay, to really build our blueprint, we need to separate two key ideas right from the start. Over here on the left, we have biological sex. That's the stuff determined by our chromosomes, XX or XY. But then on the right, you've got gender. And that's not about biology at all. It's about the roles and expectations a society creates around biological sex.
So let's start our tour of the anatomy. When we look at the external female structures, they're collectively called the vulva. And for our story today, a really central part is the clitoris, which is key to sexual arousal and response.
And if we move inward, we can see the internal reproductive system. Think of it like a connected pathway. You've got the ovaries, which produce the eggs. Those eggs then travel through the fallopian tubes to the uterus, also known as the womb, which is where a potential pregnancy would develop.
Now, let's take a look at the male reproductive organs, like the penis and the testes, which produce sperm. But here's something that is just absolutely fascinating. Despite how different they look, these male organs and the female organs we just saw, they actually develop from the exact same embryonic tissues. They're just two different outcomes from a single biological starting point. How cool is that?
So, we have the blueprint. Now let's see how that blueprint gets switched on during a phase of life that every single one of us goes through. Coming of age.
And that transformation, of course, is puberty. It's when our bodies mature and get ready for reproduction. And the whole thing is kicked off by a flood of hormones. It's basically a chemical conversation happening between the brain and the reproductive organs.
In females, puberty typically kicks in between ages 8 and 12, and it sets off a whole cascade of changes. The body literally reshapes itself. You see breast development, the hips widen, and on the inside, the uterus actually doubles in size, preparing for the role it might play later on.
Now, a huge milestone of female puberty is the beginning of the menstrual cycle. I know this chart looks a little intense, but it tells such a powerful story. See these lines up top? They show the hormones from the brain and the ovaries rising and falling in this perfect, precise rhythm. And this bottom part shows how those hormones cause the uterus to prepare itself every single month for potential pregnancy.
Okay, let's boil that whole complex cycle down into 4 phases to make it simpler. It all starts with menses. Then, during what's called the follicular phase, an egg cell matures inside the ovary. Right around the middle of the cycle, boom, ovulation happens, and the egg is released. Finally, the luteal phase gets the uterus ready for pregnancy. If it doesn't happen, the whole thing just resets and starts all over again. So, we've covered the hardware and the activation sequence. Now, let's look at the operating system in real time, the body's physiology during the sexual response cycle.
So what is actually going on inside our bodies when we get sexually aroused? Well, it's not a mystery. It's a predictable physiological process that scientists have actually mapped out in great detail.
This diagram here maps out that response cycle for both males and females. And while it looks like a lot is going on, believe it or not, almost every single physical change you see here is driven by just 2 core things. The first one is vasocongestion. That's just a fancy word for blood rushing into certain tissues. The second is myotonia, which is basically a buildup of muscle tension. That's it. Those 2 forces drive the entire cycle.
And that cycle plays out in 4 stages. First up is excitement. That's where the rush of blood causes things like erection and lubrication. This builds into the plateau phase, where arousal gets more intense. The climax, of course, is orgasm, a release of all that built-up tension through muscle contractions. And finally, there's resolution, where the body gradually returns to its resting state.
All of this incredible, complex biology, it's all leading to one place, isn't it? The creation of new life. So let's explore that final chapter, from the moment of conception all the way to birth.
The journey to a new life begins right here, with fertilization, which usually happens in the fallopian tube. From that very first moment, that single cell begins this incredible voyage, dividing and growing as it travels for several days toward the uterus. Its one and only destination, to implant in the uterine wall and begin a pregnancy.
Over the next 9 months, that single cell just transforms into a human being. The first trimester is all about building the foundation. Every major body structure gets formed. The second trimester is about explosive growth. That's often when a mother can feel the first little movements. And the third trimester, that's for the finishing touches, like gaining weight and absorbing crucial antibodies for life on the outside. This entire 9-month journey culminates in childbirth, a process that happens in 3 distinct stages. Stage 1 is all about contractions, which prepare the body for birth. Stage 2 is the moment of delivery itself. And then the final step, stage 3, is the delivery of the placenta.
And these images really capture the beginning and the end of that final process. On the left, you can see the baby is in position for stage 2, the delivery. And then over on the right, you see stage 3, the delivery of the placenta, which is the final signal that childbirth is complete.
From a single cell to a complete person, this is our shared story. It's a journey every single one of us has taken. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. After seeing all these incredible steps, what part of this process makes you look at the human body in a completely new way?